Welcome to Retire ATL with Aaron Vincent and Matt Decker. Aaron and Matt are part of the team at Vincent Financial Group, an Atlanta area firm that focuses on preparing people for retirement. They're also popular radio and podcast show hosts. And now it's time for Retire ATL.
Wrong. And that to me is more, we talked about rich versus wealthy. Yeah. We're getting back to it again. That is being wealthy. You can see the impact of things not going according to plan, and you know what your moves are going to be, right? You've planned out your moves ahead of time, and you know what it's going to mean for you. Rich might just be, well, I hope I can afford it. I hope that my cash flow is high enough to be able to afford that thing that may happen in the future. And it's like, ooh, that's tough.
And you make us be the bad guy.
That. Yeah,
we'll be the bad guy. So you can bring your 27-year-old, young Johnny who's a perpetual grad student. Time to get a job, buddy. That's the first step in your financial plan is get your adult kids paying for their own lives.
Mom and dad taking care of you long enough. Time for you to start thinking about taking care of them. I can tell you from firsthand experience, my father-in-law was put into memory care, and he had dementia, Alzheimer's. It was a bad situation, but because of what you are just saying right there. My mother-in-law, she had a plan. They had this all put together as soon as he started getting sick. They had everything taken care of. So, I mean, not to be like all sad or anything, but on his final days where the whole family is grieving and sad, that is one less thing to worry about because everything was spelled out to a T. From the first day he got sick all the way down to his funeral. Everything was taken care of because they had that plan in place. Let me give out that number real quick, 770-741-0120, the importance of having a plan. Matt, you mentioned there kind of jokingly about the couple that comes in and says, well, my plan is I'm going to take him out behind the shed and put a bullet in him. But how do you respond to someone like that? You say, okay, that's not going to work. Let's do this.
First, you have to make sure they're actually joking.
Right. Yeah. First, make sure there's actually a joke. That's tough. I mean, you can't force someone into building a great plan for themselves. Yeah. Right. You kind of have to want that. And some people do, and some people don't. And it is interesting to kind of figure out why that may be. But if I'm taking, myself out of it, and if I'm hearing that, I got to believe that the reason people feel that way is because no one wants to think about themselves, going through something like that that's so difficult. Like you mentioned your father-in-law, that's a tough thing. Like nobody wants to think about getting dementia and Alzheimer's and all the kind of emotional pain and trauma that goes with that. And so I totally understand. Like that's not an easy conversation. And if you don't want to have that conversation, if you're not ready to have that conversation, then you're not going to have it. Right. But I would just encourage you that it doesn't have to be a bad thing. It can actually be a good thing, and it can be a life-giving thing. And maybe the answers aren't as bad or as you might be thinking. It's going back to like going and seeing the doctor for the checkup. It may not be that you're going to just get manufactured bad news.
I think a lot of people say those things, those jokes, take me out back. And they say it because everyone also says this, I don't want to be a burden on my family. That's
right.
If I say to someone sitting across the table from me, I say, hey, what's one of your biggest goals for the next 20 years? Well, high on that list is I just want to be a burden to my family. I want to make sure that they're taken care of. And that's a pretty common thing.
Especially from people who have gone through it with like their own parents.
With their parents or their friends. They've seen it with their friends. So that's high on the list. So I think they say those things, take me out back and put me out of my misery. Joking, but there's a little hint of truth in it. And what they're saying sometimes is like, I have no idea what to do. I don't know what my options are. So the only thing I can think of is just make it quick and painless.
I just know that being a burden to my family is like the worst thing I can imagine.
That's worse than getting a bullet in the head.
But if you think about it, if you have no plan in place and you do get
sick,
that
is being the burden.
Then you become a burden to your
exactly.
family.
That's exactly where I was going with this. The biggest burden, the automatic burden that you will place on your family is if you don't plan for those things. You are, by definition, being a burden if you don't address it. That's just the point. And so what's also really, really fun about this is that there are a lot more options than I think most people realize. There are some pretty simple things as well. They're not talked about as much as I mentioned earlier in mainstream kind of news and articles that you read because they're not as exciting. But there are a lot of products, investment products. There are a lot of insurance products that actually are pretty favorable. And a lot of folks like, I had no idea this existed. I've heard about long-term care insurance and how you have to pay all these premiums, and if you don't use it, you lose it. And that sounds like a terrible idea, which we would agree with.
Yeah.
But there are other products that are available that most people say, I had no idea this was an option. So how many, this is a hypothetical question, anybody listening, how many options are there out there that you don't know about? You don't know.
Yeah.
And that's what we're here for.
And if you're avoiding that conversation because you don't want to create a situation where you're some kind of a burden, or you're just not sure you want to go there because it's tough to go there, I would just encourage you that it's always better to plan and prepare. And the news is probably not going to be as bad as you might think it's going to be. The conversation's not going to be as hard as you might think it's going to be. And actually, it can give a lot of life, and it can alleviate a lot of stress that you may not even know that you have. It might alleviate a lot of anxiety that's kind of keeping you captive and keeping you from making good decisions.